We are far stronger than we were 10 weeks ago.
World War II saw many innovations being developed by the Allies. They could gain an edge in the war.
Our German colleagues who had built a radio telescope at Effelsberg near Bonn.
Join us as we look at the secret invention that changed World War II. Battle of Britain Day. The Battle of Britain Day commemorates the day on which a large-scale aerial conflict occurred. By June 1940, the Wehrmacht had seized most of Western Europe and Scandinavia. Given Nazi Germany's non-aggression pact with the Soviet Union, the British Empire and the Commonwealth were the only major powers standing in the way of a German-dominated Europe at the time. After the British rejected repeated peace overtures, Adolf Hitler ordered the Luftwaffe to destroy Britain's Royal Air Force to obtain air dominance or air supremacy before launching Operation Sea Lion, the Wehrmacht's amphibious assault on the British mainland. In July 1940, the Luftwaffe began by shutting the English Channel to maritime vessels. OperationEagle Attack began in August, targeting RAF airfields in southern England. By the first week of September, the Luftwaffe had not achieved the results Hitler desired. Frustrated, the Germans resorted to strategic bombing of cities, an attack designed to harm the British military and civil industries, as well as civilian morale. On Sunday, September 15, 1940, the Luftwaffe began its greatest and most concentrated attack on London, hoping to drag the RAF into a fight of destruction. Approximately 1,500 aircraft took part in the airfights, which lasted until sunset. The operation marked the culmination of the Battle of Britain. The German raids were successfully repulsed by the RAF Fighter Command. A huge cloud base fragmented the Luftwaffe formations, allowing them to avoid causing significant damage to London. Following the raid, Hitler postponed Sea Lion. After being defeated in daylight, the Luftwaffe shifted its focus to the Blitz night operations, which lasted into May 1941. Battle of Britain Day, celebrated on September 15th, is now an annual remembrance of the battle in the United Kingdom. In Canada, the remembrance is held on the third Sunday of September. The problem: fragile vacuum tube. In this video, you can see electronics at work made by Westinghouse, showing tubes, valves, and various tube equipment used in World War II. Vacuum tubes must be heated to function. Most were constructed of glass, which were brittle and readily broke. Vacuum tubes were employed in the original computers, such as the ENIAC, which were enormous and required a lot of work to operate. Tommy Flowers invented Colossus I and its successor Colossus II for Bletchley Park during World War II, and the General Post Office built them to significantly speed up the job of breaking German high-level Lorenz encryption. Colossus supplanted a previous system that used relay and switch logic. Colossus was able to break communications that had previously taken weeks. It was also far more reliable. Colossus was the first time vacuum tubes were used in tandem on such a vast scale in one machine. Proximity fuse. World War I provided an object lesson in the force and efficacy of aerial warfare. Given such technical advancements, the concept of a proximity fuse seemed appealing and deceptively simple. Germany attempted to build such a fuse for artillery and explosives in the early 1930s. It persisted in its efforts during World War II, but eventually concluded it was an unrealistic concept that would never be implemented. Japan also focused on developing a fuse and was able to produce a working prototype. However, they fielded it too late in the war to be important and only used it once, in a dropped bomb. British scientists began working on a proximity fuse in the late 1930s, resolving enough intrinsic issues to test moderately functional versions. Their efforts were hampered by cost overruns and the dual difficulties of downsized components and mass production flexibility. With the war on their doorstep, they communicated their findings and began to collaborate with the ongoing American fuse effort. The U.S. National Defense Research Committee, established in 1940, acted as a liaison between the National Academy of Sciences and the Pentagon. Everyone familiar with the limits of traditional AA artillery understood the need of developing a realistic artillery fuse that did not rely on time-to-target calculations or even physical contact with a target. Gunners at the time acknowledged that knocking down a small, fast-moving, and high-flying aircraft was primarily a question of luck. Period research revealed that a direct hit may occur in 1 out of every 1,200 AA rounds fired. Luck, indeed. Section T's scientists, engineers, and ordnance experts confronted a slew of obstacles in developing a functional VT fuse. Given these criteria, it's no surprise that advanced nations abandoned the proximity fuse as a technological dream beyond their research and production capabilities. However, American scientists, engineers, innovators, technicians, ordnance specialists, and mass production manufacturers were able to find solutions to the obstacles. They truly accomplished it. The fuse produced by Section T and its associated groups used a small radio transmitter and receiver with an amplifier. It contained a thyrotron trigger, a gas-filled tube that functioned as an electronic switch. It also used battery-powered safety equipment to prevent inadvertent detonations. Once the projectile was launched, the transmitter put out a continuous radio signal that rebounded back from the moving target, the same way radar works. The receiver caught the return signal, which intensified as the shell approached its target. When the signal level exceeded a particular threshold, it engaged the thyrotron trigger, which released an electrical charge held in a capacitor. That charge tripped an electronic detonator, which set up the main explosive, which in 5-inch AA shells was ammonium picrate, also known as explosive D. Developmental engineers proceeded to modify the fuses to fit various calibers of American and British AA guns, as well as other naval guns. They also adapted fuses to fit airborne bombs and field artillery pieces. This meant creating 8 separate fuses for the US Navy, 12 for the US Army, 4 for the Royal Navy, and 6 for the British Army. As the proximity fuse proved effective in combat, demand increased. Eventually, around 70 versions of the device were in production, necessitating ongoing testing, modification, and assembly line adjustments. The US and UK went to tremendous efforts to guarantee that no instances slipped into enemy hands. To that reason, the gadget was initially restricted to naval troops, effectively preventing enemy forces from retrieving dud shells to analyze and copy for use against the Allies. The impact. The proximity fuses created during World War II significantly boosted the efficacy of artillery by initiating the explosion of the shell based on its closeness to the target. This was accomplished by incorporating a miniature radar-style radio sender receiver within the fuse. This technology was dependent on the availability of rugged miniature vacuum tubes prior to the advent of solid-state electronics. In 1942, James Van Allen contributed to the development of the necessary tubes. After returning to Iowa in 1955, he constructed the scientific instrumentation for America's first successful satellite, Explorer 1. Instruments on early spacecraft had to meet some of the same durability and size requirements as proximity fuses. As a result, their design drew on the expertise learned from designing the fuse's microelectronic components. Data from Explorer 1 and succeeding satellites led to the discovery of the Van Allen Belt, a zone of strong radiation that surrounds Earth. Tizard Mission. The Tizard Mission, formerly known as the British Technical and Scientific Mission, was a group from the United Kingdom that visited the United States during World War II to exchange classified research and development projects with military implications. It was given its famous name by Henry Tizard, a British physicist and chairman of the Aeronautical Research Committee, which oversaw radar research. The mission arrived in the United States in September 1940, during the Battle of Britain. They conveyed many British technical and scientific secrets to secure U.S. assistance in sustaining the war effort and obtaining industrial resources to exploit the military potential of these technologies, which Britain could not fully utilize due to the immediate demands of other war-related production. In reference to one such British secret, a device known as a resonant cavity magnetron brought to America in 1940 by the Tizard mission was one of the most valuable cargo ever brought on American soil. The mission also opened communication lines for the development of jet engines and atomic bombs, resulting in the British contribution to the Manhattan Project and catalyzing Allied technological cooperation during World War II. The Tizard mission is seen as a pivotal event in the formation of the wartime Anglo-American alliance. Following the war, it served as the framework for future scientific research collaboration among universities in the United States, the United Kingdom, and Canada. Eureka. Luftwaffe. The Luftwaffe was the Wehrmacht's aerial warfare branch prior to and during World War II. Germany's main aviation arms of World War I, the Luftstreitkräfte of the Imperial Army, and the Marinefliegerabteilung of the Imperial Navy, were abolished in May 1920 in compliance with the stipulations of the 1919 Treaty of Versailles, which prohibited Germany from creating an air force. During the interwar period, German pilots were surreptitiously trained at Lipetsk Air Base in the Soviet Union, violating the pact. With the advent of the Nazi Party and the rejection of the Versailles Treaty, the Luftwaffe's existence was publicly confirmed on February 26, 1935, just over 2 weeks before outright defiance of the Versailles Treaty via German rearmament and conscription was proclaimed on March 16th. The Condor Legion, a Luftwaffe detachment assigned to support nationalist troops during the Spanish Civil War, served as a crucial testing ground for new tactics and aircraft. When World War II broke out in September 1939, the Luftwaffe had become one of the world's most complex, technologically advanced, and battle-tested air armies, thanks in part to this combat experience. In the summer of 1939, the Luftwaffe had 28 Geschwader. The Luftwaffe also had a paratrooper unit called the Fallschirmjäger. The Luftwaffe played a key role in Germany's triumphs in Poland and Western Europe in 1939 and 1940. During the Battle of Britain, however, despite severely damaging the RAF's infrastructure and destroying numerous British cities during the ensuing Blitz, the German Air Force failed to hammer the desperate British to submission. Since 1942, Allied bombing assaults gradually destroyed the Luftwaffe's fighter arm. Since late 1942, the Luftwaffe used surplus ground support and other soldiers to form Luftwaffe field divisions. In addition to its Western operations, the Luftwaffe flew over the Soviet Union, North Africa, and Southern Europe. Despite its late use of modern turbojet and rocket-propelled aircraft to destroy Allied bombers, the Luftwaffe was outmatched by the Allies' superior numbers and improved tactics, as well as a shortage of skilled pilots and aviation fuel. In January 1945, during the latter phases of the Battle of the Bulge, the Luftwaffe attempted a last-ditch effort to gain air superiority, but failed. With rapidly depleting supplies of fuel, oil, and lubricants following this campaign, and as part of the United Wehrmacht military forces, the Luftwaffe ceased to be a viable combat force. Following Nazi Germany's surrender, the Luftwaffe was abolished in 1946. During World War II, German pilots claimed over 70,000 aerial victories, while more than 75,000 Luftwaffe aircraft were destroyed or severely damaged. Approximately 40,000 of these were completely lost. Throughout its history, the Luftwaffe was led by only 2 commanders-in-chief, Reichsmarschall Hermann Göring and, for the final 2 weeks of the war, General Feldmarschall Robert Ritter von Greim. The Luftwaffe was heavily implicated in Nazi war crimes. By the conclusion of the war, concentration camps produced a major portion of airplanes, supporting an industry that employed tens of thousands of prisoners. The Luftwaffe's need for labor was one of the elements that contributed to the expulsion and murder of hundreds of thousands of Hungarian Jews in 1944. The Luftwaffe routinely bombed non-military targets. The Oberkommando der Luftwaffe orchestrated Nazi human experiments, and Luftwaffe ground soldiers carried out killings in Italy, Greece, and Poland. British First Radar Defense System, 1930. Radar, or radio detection and ranging, was a critical role in the success of Britain's air defenses during the Battle of Britain. Radar could be used to detect and track incoming hostile aircraft. It worked by sending out radio waves that bounced off solid objects at a distance, allowing operators to estimate 4 key aspects of oncoming raids: range, bearing, strength, and height. Radar was an essential component of the Dowding system, Britain's highly effective and complex air defense network. This technique enabled the Royal Air Force Fighter Command to respond to impending German attacks while maximizing the use of its valuable pilot and aircraft resources. Radar provided early notice of oncoming raids. This information was routed through Fighter Command HQ and subsequently distributed throughout the defense network. This gave fighter defenders critical time to plan for and intercept strikes. Radar was not always reliable and did not provide a complete picture of the oncoming threat. Extra intelligence was provided by the Observer Corps. Its effectiveness was also determined by the ability and judgment of the operators who interpreted the signals. Radar was invented in Germany. Thus, Britain was not the only country to employ it. What truly gave Britain the advantage was Germany's failure to recognize how important radar was to the country's defense. Although they did target some stations, only Ventnor on the Isle of Wight was taken out of commission for an extended period. The Germans never focused their efforts on destroying radar sites. Therefore, this critical component of Britain's air defense remained mostly intact during the Battle of Britain. Groundwork: American invasion to liberate Europe. Churchill and Roosevelt met on August 9 and 10, 1941, aboard the USS Augusta in Placentia Bay, Newfoundland, to discuss their respective military goals and to sketch out a post-war international organization. The charter they developed featured 8 common principles that the United States and Great Britain agreed to support in the post-war world. Both countries decided not to seek territorial expansion, but rather to liberalize international trade, promote maritime freedom, and international labor, economic, and welfare standards. Most crucially, both the United States and Great Britain were committed to assisting the restoration of self-governments for all countries occupied during the war, as well as allowing all peoples to select their own type of government. While the meeting was successful in establishing these goals, neither leader received the expected results. President Roosevelt anticipated that the charter would persuade Americans to support U.S. engagement in World War II on behalf of the Allies. Nevertheless, public opinion remained staunchly opposed to such a policy until the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor in December 1941. Churchill's principal goal during the Atlantic Conference was to get the Americans into the war. Aside from that, he hoped that the United States would expand its military help to Great Britain and warn Japan against any aggressive activities in the Pacific. Roosevelt, on the other hand, wanted the British government to publicly state that it was not involved in any secret treaties, particularly those involving territorial issues, such as those reached by the Allies during World War I regarding the division of enemy territory at war's end. Roosevelt also wanted to negotiate the terms under which Great Britain would compensate the U.S. for its Lend-Lease support. Roosevelt wanted the British to compensate by dismantling their imperial preference system, which had been established by the British government during the Great Depression and was intended to encourage trade within the British Empire by lowering tariff rates between members while maintaining discriminatory tariff rates against outsiders. Churchill was profoundly unhappy by Roosevelt's refusal to contemplate American involvement in the war. Furthermore, Churchill recognized that certain sections of the intended joint declaration could be politically detrimental to the Prime Minister. Churchill feared that abandoning imperial preference would enrage the Conservative Party's protectionist element. The Americans were likewise reluctant to warn Japan too strongly about any future military action against British territories in Southeast Asia. Finally, Churchill and many members of his cabinet were disturbed by the Charter's third point, which referenced all people's freedom to form their own governments. Churchill was concerned that this paragraph acknowledged colonial subjects' freedom to advocate for decolonization, even those in Great Britain's empire. While the Atlantic Charter of August 1941 was not a legally binding convention, it was still significant for a variety of reasons. First, it officially declared the United States and Great Britain's alliance against Axis aggression. Second, it outlined President Roosevelt's Wilsonian vision for the post-war world, which included freer trade, self-determination, disarmament, and collective security. Finally, the Charter served as a source of inspiration for colonial subjects fighting for independence across the Third World, from Algeria to Vietnam. The journey. The individuals who comprised Britain's special forces had a strong sense of independence and creativity. Men like Ord Wingate, Roger Courtney, David Stirling, and Ralph Bagnald sought a new approach to wage war. They gathered like-minded people around them to prepare for, plan, and carry out their own missions. They devised new techniques for completing new assignments. They benefited from technological advancements at the time. Such combat was made possible by improved radio communication, better air and sea transportation, more reliable motor vehicles, and powerful new weaponry and explosives. They also had Winston Churchill as a prominent backer. When the expedition began, the Prime Minister supported their goals, even though the military high command was frequently unenthusiastic. Cavity magnetron. The cavity magnetron is a high-power vacuum tube that was first employed in radar systems, then microwave ovens, and finally linear particle accelerators. A cavity magnetron generates microwaves by interacting a stream of electrons with a magnetic field as it moves through a succession of cavity resonators, which are small, open cavities in a metal block. Electrons travel through the cavities, causing microwaves to oscillate inside, like a whistle, producing a tone when activated by an airstream blasted past its aperture. The diameters of the cavities define the arrangement's resonance frequency. Unlike other vacuum tubes, such as a klystron or traveling wave tube, the magnetron cannot be used as an amplifier to increase the intensity of an applied microwave signal. Instead, it functions solely as an electronic oscillator, generating a microwave signal from direct current electricity supplied to the vacuum tube. Legacy. Sir Henry Tizard proposed in early 1940 that British radar technical secrets be shared with the Americans, so their superior production facilities might be made more available to aid the British war effort. Neither Churchill nor Watson Watt agreed. Nonetheless, he arranged for his former colleague from the 1935 committee, A.V. Hill, to travel to Washington to investigate the possibilities. His report to Tizard was encouraging. By July 1940, the Battle of Britain was raging, and France had already fallen, making the concept much more appealing. Thus, a delegation of 7, led by Tizard, arrived in Washington on September 12th to begin discussions. All 3 armed services were represented, and Taffy Bowen was present particularly to discuss radar. He was permitted to carry Magnetron No. 12 with him. The Magnetron had only been sent to T.R. Ewing about 6 weeks before. The expedition concluded that Britain was in the lead on most counts, but that certain components of American radar were more sophisticated. The Magnetron, however, was met with the most enthusiasm. Initially, a new microwave committee was formed, with Dr. Alfred Loomis as chairman. This individual was responsible for converting U.S. radar to centimetric wavelengths. The microwave committee quickly agreed to support rapid manufacturing of the Magnetron, with the Bell Telephone Company carrying out the task. They created the first 30 in October 1940, and by the end of the war, well over 1 million U.S. Magnetrons had been made. Although the Tizard trip was heralded as a success, it is strange that upon his return to London on October 8, 1940, he discovered that his employment no longer existed. Kamikaze attacks on U.S. ships. On April 6, 1945, the first wave of 10 synchronized kamikaze strikes began against the United States Navy's 5th Fleet off the coast of Okinawa. Ships of the 5th Fleet had faced suicide attacks before, but never on this scale. The horrifying sight of Japanese pilots diving their planes into ships would become commonplace over the next 2.5 months. Aircraft carriers and battleships were supposed to be the primary targets, but the destroyers and smaller vessels tasked with protecting the fleet from oncoming attacks were the most heavily damaged. One such destroyer was the USS Newcomb. The Newcomb had previously seen battle in the Mariana Islands, Palau, and the Philippines, but it was in Okinawa that she would fight her most fierce battle. On board the destroyer was 21-year-old John Chapman, a first-class boatswain's mate and gun captain for a 5-inch cannon. Faced with opposing pilots eager to devote their lives to sink his ship, he found it almost incomprehensible. People they had always known were not like that. They were brave individuals and fought, but they weren't someone who would intentionally risk their lives to take yours. On April 6th, more than 300 kamikazes departed from southern Kyushu. Their aim was the United States 5th Fleet, which was stationed to help the war in Okinawa. As the Japanese pilots arrived, they separated into smaller attack groups. John Chapman was stationed at his gun post on the stern of the USS Newcomb. There were probably 45 planes in the sky. It was a terrifying situation because they knew they were going to dive on them. They might be firing at the aircraft, and they'd keep coming right through it, and they'd see bits going over the planes and everything, but they'd just keep coming. The Newcomb shot down 4 enemy aircraft, and 5 more hit the ship. Those on board who were not killed or injured fought desperately not only to put out the blazing fires and repair damaged engines, but also to continue firing at an adversary intent on sinking them. The incident aboard the Newcomb was duplicated on several other vessels in the fleet that day. The fires were roaring completely out of control. Between the bridge and the afterdeck house, it was a significant portion of the ship. It was nothing but a raging inferno. Flames were shooting. It was as high as 1,000 feet off the Newcomb. Firefighters battling the blazing fires forced John Chapman and his injured pal to leap overboard. There was no more place on the stern for them to remain. Chapman handed the injured friend his lifebelt, and once in the water, dragged him to a lifeboat. They were later rescued, along with many others, from the waters off Okinawa. 91 sailors were killed or injured on the USS Newcomb. Many of those injured sustained severe burns. Despite being attacked by 5 kamikazes, the crew of the Newcomb managed to keep their ship afloat and earned the Navy Unit Commendation as well as 8 combat stars for their service during World War II. In our thumbnail, we can see pieces of artillery that were detrimental to the success the Allies enjoyed when the tide of the war began to turn in their favor. It's clear that collaboration between the United Kingdom and the United States was instrumental in turning the tide of World War II. Which one was your favorite? Why don't you let us know in the comments below? Well, that's it for now. I hope you enjoyed this video. Please give us a like and let us know in the comments what you think. Check out our other videos and subscribe to be part of the fun. Click on the notification icon so you can see our new videos as soon as they're uploaded. Thank you for watching and see you next time.